I was a kid, everyone in our town knew the story of the old Armitage Bridge. The way the adults told it, the bridge was just a crumbling relic, something built long before the city grew to surround it. A forgotten path, nothing more. But that's not how we saw it. For us, the bridge was a legend. They said it wasn't really a bridge at all, not in the way you'd think. Sure, it looked like an ordinary stretch of stone and iron. But according to the stories, if you walked across it, if you dared to take even a single step too far, you'd vanish. Forever. I remember sitting with my friends late at night, daring each other to go. No one ever did. Not really. But we all heard the rumors. About the kid who crossed it back in the 90s and was never seen again. About the woman who went looking for her lost dog and disappeared herself. And, of course, the whispers about the strange lights people sometimes saw around the bridge at night. Most people laughed it off. Just another ghost story. Just something to scare kids away from playing too close to the edge. But there were always a few who believed. I didn't believe. Not at first. But that was before the night I crossed the bridge. It started with a dare, like most bad decisions do. Me, Sam, Ben, and Alyssa were hanging out, bored and restless. Sam had been the one to bring it up. "Let's check out the bridge," he said, a devilish grin on his face. I remember laughing it off. "Yeah, right?" But Sam was relentless, and soon enough, his words got under my skin. "Come on, Tess. What are you afraid of? It's just a stupid bridge." It wasn't just a bridge, though. Not to me. "Fine," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Let's do it." The others didn't need much convincing. Within half an hour, we were standing on the outskirts of town, the bridge looming in front of us. It was smaller than I expected. Older. The iron railing was rusted, and weeds grew between the cracks in the stone. A mist clung to the air around it, making the whole thing look like something out of a nightmare. I told myself it was just a bridge that led to an overgrown path on the other side, hidden by trees and shadows. Nothing mystical, nothing to be afraid of. But as we got closer, the air seemed to change. It felt heavier, thicker, like I was wading through water. "I don't like this," Alyssa muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't be such a baby," Sam said, but even he didn't sound so sure anymore. We stood at the edge of the bridge for what felt like an eternity. None of us wanted to be the first to step onto it. Finally, Sam took the lead, grinning like he was trying to convince himself this was all a joke. "Come on," he said, glancing back at us. "What's the worst that could happen?" I didn't answer. We followed him onto the bridge, one by one. At first, nothing happened. The stone beneath my feet felt solid, real. But as we walked, the air grew colder. My breath came out in little puffs of mist, even though it wasn't winter. And then I heard it, a low, humming sound like a distant vibration. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. No one answered. We were halfway across when the mist thickened. It rolled in like a living thing, curling around us, swallowing the world beyond the bridge. Sam was just a few steps ahead, but already he was fading into the fog. And then, he was gone. No scream, no sound, just gone. Alyssa called, her voice trembling. She took a step forward, and Ben grabbed her arm. "Don't," he said, his voice tight with panic. But it was too late. The bridge shifted beneath my feet, the stone twisting in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The air buzzed with energy, and the mist seemed to move, like it was alive. Something was coming. I don't remember running. I don't remember crossing back to the other side. All I know is that one moment I was standing on the bridge, and the next I was collapsing onto the grass, gasping for air. I was alone. No Sam, no Ben, no Elise, just me. The police didn't believe me. When I stumbled into the station that night, soaked in cold sweat and shaking like a leaf, I told them everything I could. How the four of us went to the bridge, how the mist swallowed everything, how my friends just disappeared. They didn't say it outright, but I could see it in their faces. They thought I was lying, or worse, that I had something to do with it. "We'll file a report," one officer said, his tone flat. "But are you sure they didn't just wander off? Kids pull stunts like this all the time." "Wander off?" I repeated, my voice rising. "How do 3 people wander off in the middle of a bridge?" He didn't answer. By morning, Search teams were combing the woods around the bridge. Helicopters flew low over the trees, their blades thundering through the air. I stayed at home, glued to the news, waiting for any updates. But they didn't find anything. No footprints, no clothing, not even a shoe. It was like Sam, Ben, and Alyssa had been erased from the earth. The town was buzzing with rumors. Some people blamed me. Others said the kids must have run away, that they'd planned this whole thing just to scare people. But there were a few, just a few, who whispered the same thing over and over again. It's the bridge. I wanted to dismiss it, to tell myself it wasn't real, that I hadn't actually seen the mist move or felt the bridge twist beneath me. But deep down, I knew better. And then the dream started. At first, they were just flashes, shadows moving through the fog, strange lights flickering in the distance. But soon, they became something more. In one dream, I was back on the bridge, walking through an endless mist. I could hear voices around me, familiar voices. Sam's laughter, Ben's deep chuckle, Alyssa calling my name. "Tess," she said, her voice echoing. "Help me, please." I turned, trying to follow the sound, but the bridge stretched out forever in both directions. And then I saw it, a figure in the mist. It was tall, too tall, its limbs impossibly long, its head tilting to one side as if it were studying me. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its gaze. And then it spoke. "You shouldn't have come back." I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. For a moment, I thought it was just a nightmare. But then I heard it, the same low humming sound I'd heard on the bridge. It was coming from outside my window. When I pulled back the curtain, there was nothing there, just the quiet street and the flickering glow of the streetlights. But the feeling didn't leave me. That heavy, suffocating presence. Like I wasn't alone. The next few days were worse. The humming followed me everywhere, soft at first, but growing louder the longer I ignored it. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision, darting away whenever I tried to look directly at them. And then there was the mirror. I was brushing my teeth one night when I saw it, something standing behind me just for a second. It wasn't human. Its body was too thin, its arms too long. I spun around, but nothing was there. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just traumatized by what had happened. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something had followed me back. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that the humming, the shadows, the figure in the mirror, it was all in my head. But that lie didn't last long. The thing following me, it wasn't just watching anymore. It was getting closer. It started small, lights in my room flickering for no reason. My phone ringing, but no one on the other end. Once, I found my window open, even though I was sure I'd locked it before going to bed. But then it got worse. One night, I woke up gasping for air. My chest felt heavy, like someone was pressing down on it. My room was pitch black, but I could feel something there, standing over me. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't work. And then I saw them. Fingers impossibly long and thin, reaching out of the darkness toward my face. "Leave me alone," I choked out, my voice finally breaking free. And just like that, the pressure lifted, the shadows dissolved, but the fear stayed. The next morning, I tried to talk to my mom. I didn't tell her everything. I couldn't, but I told her enough. I said I wasn't sleeping, that I felt like something was wrong. She gave me a worried look, then said, "Tess, maybe you should see someone. A counselor. A counselor wouldn't help. Not with this." That's when I knew I couldn't keep ignoring it. Whatever had followed me back from the bridge, it wasn't going away. If I didn't do something, it would destroy me. I decided to go back to the bridge, not to cross it, but just to see if being near it would give me any answers. I went in the middle of the day, when the sun was high and the world felt safer. But even then, the bridge felt wrong. The air was heavy, like it had been that night. The mist wasn't there, but I could still feel it hanging just out of sight. And then I saw it, a shoe, lying in the grass near the edge of the bridge. It was Ben's. My stomach turned. I picked it up, staring at the worn fabric, the laces I'd watched him tie 1,000 times. He'd been here, but why hadn't the search teams found it? I looked out over the bridge, the stone path stretching into the distance. For a moment, I thought I saw movement, just a flicker like something slipping into the shadows. Tess. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. No one was there, but the voice, it was Alyssa's. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing. My friends were still out there, somewhere, and if I didn't figure out how to stop this, I was going to end up like them. Here's part 5 of Bridge Over the Edge. I couldn't sleep after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, Sam, Ben, Alyssa, staring at me with those hollow, empty eyes. But it wasn't just their faces that haunted me. It was the realization that they weren't gone. They were still out there, somewhere, twisted and broken by whatever lurked on the other side of the bridge. And it wanted me back. The humming followed me everywhere now. I heard it at school, at the grocery store, even in my dreams. Shadows moved at the edges of my vision, always disappearing when I turned to look. I started to feel like I was losing my mind, but then I saw the marks. It was the middle of the night when I noticed them. 3 long, jagged scratches running down the wall by my bed. They weren't there before. I was sure of it. The sight of them made my stomach churn. They looked just like the marks I'd found inside the closet. Something was coming for me. That's when I made a decision. I couldn't keep running. I couldn't keep ignoring this. Whatever was happening to me, whatever had followed me back, I had to face it. And that meant going back to the bridge. The next day, I started preparing. I packed a flashlight, some rope, a notebook, and a handful of other things I thought I might need. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I wasn't going to let it catch me off guard. I also went back to the police station. I didn't tell them everything, just enough to make them think I was going to look for clues about my friend's disappearance. I didn't expect them to help, but I wanted someone to know where I was going, just in case. That night, I stood at the edge of the bridge, staring into the darkness. The air felt heavy again, just like before. Cold mist clung to my skin, and the stone path stretched out before me, disappearing into the shadows. For a moment, I almost turned back. My body screamed at me to run, to get as far away from that place as possible. But then I thought about my friends, about the faces I'd seen in the closet. They were trapped on the other side, and if I didn't do something, I would be too. I took a deep breath, stepped onto the bridge, and crossed into the unknown. The moment I stepped onto the bridge, the world seemed to shift. The air grew colder, heavy with an electric charge that made my skin prickle. The hum I'd been hearing, the one that had haunted me for days, was louder now, vibrating through my bones. Step by step, I moved forward, my flashlight cutting through the thick mist. The beam barely reached more than a few feet ahead, swallowed by the swirling fog. The bridge felt endless. I couldn't tell how far I'd gone, or if I was even moving at all. And then I heard them. Tess. The voices were faint, carried on the wind, but they were unmistakable. Some. Ben. Alyssa. I'm here. I called back, my voice trembling. I'm coming. But the moment I spoke, the air seemed to ripple, like the world was reacting to my presence. The humming grew sharper, louder, and the mist began to move. It twisted and coiled, taking shape in front of me. I stopped, gripping the flashlight like a weapon as the fog condensed into a figure. It was tall, too tall, its limbs impossibly long and thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, and its eyes glowed faintly, like embers in the dark. You shouldn't have come back, it said. Its voice wasn't human. It was layered, overlapping whispers that clawed at my ears. I took a step back, my pulse hammering in my chest. Where are they? I demanded. What did you do to them? The figure didn't answer. It didn't need to. The mist around me began to swirl again, and I felt something brush against my arm. I spun around, but there was nothing there. And then I saw them, shapes moving in the fog, darting just out of reach. Sam, Ben, Alyssa. They weren't whole anymore. Their bodies were twisted, their faces pale and warped, their eyes dark pits that reflected nothing. Tess, they said, their voices hollow. Help us. I'm trying. I shouted, tears streaming down my face. I'm trying to get you out. But the tall figure stepped closer, its presence overwhelming. You don't belong here, it said. Go back. I'm not leaving without them. I yelled. The figure tilted its head, almost as if it were amused. They are mine, it said. And soon, You will be too. The ground beneath me began to shift, the stone twisting and cracking like something alive. I stumbled, barely keeping my balance. And then it lunged. I screamed, raising my flashlight as the figure reached for me with claw-like fingers. The beam struck its face, and for a moment it recoiled, hissing like steam escaping a pipe. That's when I saw it, a faint glow deep within the mist. It was far away, but I felt its pull, a shimmering light that seemed to vibrate with power. I didn't know what it was, but I knew one thing. It was my only chance. I ran. The fog closed in around me, the whispers growing louder, more frantic. Shapes darted in and out of the mist, brushing against me, clawing at my arms. But I didn't stop. The light grew brighter as I approached, pulsing like a heartbeat. And then suddenly I was there. It wasn't a light at all. It was a door, a massive, glowing archway carved into the fog, its surface rippling like water. "Tess," the voices behind me called. "Don't leave us." I turned, my heart breaking at the sight of my friends reaching for me, their twisted forms illuminated by the glow. "I'll come back," I promised. "I swear." And then I stepped through the door. The world on the other side of the door wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. It was dark, but not like night. The sky was a swirling, shifting mass of shadows and faint lights, like a storm frozen in time. The ground beneath me felt solid, but it wasn't stone or dirt, more like glass, cold and unyielding. And it was silent, not the kind of silence you find in an empty room, but something deeper, something oppressive, a silence that swallowed sound before it even formed. I turned to look behind me, expecting to see the glowing archway, but it was gone. The door had disappeared. I was alone, or so I thought. I started walking, my footsteps echoing faintly despite the silence. The ground stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by jagged shapes in the distance. Towers, maybe, or mountains. It was impossible to tell. And then I saw them, the figures. They were scattered across the landscape, standing perfectly still, their bodies dark silhouettes against the faint glow of the horizon. At first, I thought they were statues, but as I got closer, I realized they were moving. Not walking, not shifting, but breathing. Their chests rose and fell in slow, rhythmic motions, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. I stopped, my heart pounding. They didn't seem to notice me. But then one of them turned. Its face was featureless, smooth and empty, like a mannequin. It didn't have eyes, but somehow, I felt it looking at me. I took a step back, and its head tilted, almost curiously. Then it started moving toward me. Slowly at first, its steps deliberate, almost hesitant. But as it moved, the others turned too. One by one, their heads snapped toward me, their featureless faces tilting in unison. And then they began to run. I didn't wait. I bolted, my legs burning as I sprinted across the endless, glass-like plain. The figures didn't make any sound as they chased me, but I could feel them, their presence like a weight pressing against my back. I didn't know where I was going. There was no path, no landmarks to follow. But then in the distance, I saw it. A shape. It was small at first, just a faint outline, but as I got closer, I realized it was a house. Not just any house. My house. It didn't make sense, but there it was, my front porch, my windows, my childhood swing hanging from the tree out front. It looked exactly the same as it had the day I left for the bridge. I didn't stop to question it. I threw myself through the door, slamming it shut behind me. The silence outside was replaced by the faint hum I'd grown so used to. But for the first time, it felt like a relief. I turned, my chest heaving, and froze. Sam, Ben, and Alyssa were standing in the living room, their hollow eyes fixed on me. "You came back," Alyssa said, her voice a mix of relief and accusation. "Well, what is this?" I whispered. "This is what's left of us," Sam said. I felt my throat tighten. "I'm here to help you, to get you out." Ben shook his head. "There's no way out. Not for us. Not anymore. There has to be." I shouted. "There has to..." But before I could finish, the door behind me creaked open. The silence from outside poured into the room like a flood, and with it came a shadow. The tall figure. "You don't belong here," it said. The figure filled the doorway, its impossibly tall frame casting a shadow that seemed to stretch across the entire room. "You don't belong here," it said again, its voice layered with that same overlapping, distorted tone that made my ears ache. I stepped back, instinctively putting myself between the figure and my friends. "You took them," I said, my voice trembling but defiant. "You did this to them." It tilted its head, the motion sharp and unnatural. "They crossed the threshold. They are part of this world now. You are not." I glanced over my shoulder at Sam, Ben, and Alyssa. They looked smaller now, their twisted forms hunched and frail. But their eyes, empty and dark, stayed locked on me. "Tess," Alyssa said, her voice cracking. "It's too late for us. You need to leave." "No," I said firmly, my hands shaking. "I'm not leaving without you." "You cannot save them," the figure said, stepping into the room. The wall seemed to bend and groan as it moved closer. "They belong to the void. They belong with me," I shouted. For a split second, everything went silent. Then the room erupted. The walls cracked, the floor rippled beneath my feet, and the figure lunged. Its claw-like hands reached for me, impossibly fast, but I was ready. I swung the flashlight like a club, the beam cutting through the darkness as it connected with the figure's chest. It staggered back, hissing, but the momentary victory was short-lived. The light dimmed, flickered, and went out. "Tess!" Sam shouted. I turned to see him rushing toward me, his movements jerky and unnatural, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. "Take this," he said, thrusting something into my hand. It was the notebook I'd brought with me, the one I'd been using to piece together the truth. But now, the pages were covered in strange symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the chaos. "It's the key," Alyssa said, her voice distant. "It's how you can end this." I didn't understand what she meant, but I didn't have time to ask. The figure was recovering, its head snapping back into place as it fixed its glowing eyes on me. "Go," Ben said, his voice firm. "We'll hold it off." "No," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I can't." "You have to," Sam interrupted. "If you stay, you'll end up like us. Just promise you won't forget us." "I won't," I whispered. I turned and ran, clutching the notebook tightly. The house seemed to stretch and twist as I moved, the walls bending and folding like something alive. The front door appeared ahead of me, glowing faintly. Behind me, I could hear the sounds of a struggle. Sam, Ben, and Alyssa shouting, the figure hissing and snarling. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. "Tess!" Alyssa's voice rang out, desperate. "Go!" I opened the door and stepped through. The silence hit me like a wave, and when I turned back, the house was gone. I was standing on the bridge again, the mist swirling around me. The notebook in my hands felt warm, almost alive, its symbols glowing brighter now. I didn't know how to use it, but one thing was clear. If I wanted to save them, I'd have to go back. But not yet. Not like this. I needed to prepare. When I got back to my side of the bridge, it was almost dawn. The mist was thinning, and the world felt normal. Birds chirped, and a faint breeze rustled the leaves in the trees. But nothing felt normal to me. I clutched the notebook tightly, the strange, glowing symbols burning in my mind. I didn't know how they worked or what they meant, but I knew they were the key to saving my friends, and the key to surviving the thing that had followed me. That morning, I went back to the library, not because I thought they'd have books on otherworldly bridges or glowing symbols, but because I didn't know where else to start. I poured through everything I could find, local legends, ancient myths, anything that might connect to what I'd seen. Most of it felt like dead ends. Stories about spirits trapped between worlds, about cursed places that pull people in and never let them go. But one story caught my attention. It was a short passage in a book about Appalachian folklore. It described something called a veil, a boundary between our world and the other. The book said that the veil was thin in certain places. Bridges, doorways, crossroads, and it warned that crossing the veil always came at a cost. I ran my fingers over the notebook, the glowing symbols faint now in the daylight. The cost wasn't just my friends, it was me. The thing on the other side, the figure, wanted me back. It had been following me ever since I returned, trying to pull me under again. And if I didn't find a way to stop it, it would. But how do you fight something like that? As I flipped through the notebook, the symbols seemed to shift and blur, like they were alive. They made no sense to me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were trying to tell me something. That night, I spread the notebook out on my bed, along with the flashlight and the rope I'd brought to the bridge. I added whatever else I thought might help: a mirror, a lighter, a handful of salt from the kitchen. The stories I'd read about the Veil said it wasn't just a place. It was alive, reacting to the thoughts and fears of anyone who crossed it. That's why the thing in the mist could twist reality. Why it could change my friends into something unrecognizable. If I was going to go back, I needed to be stronger than it. I needed to stay focused. But as I prepared, the humming started again. This time, it was louder, more insistent, and it wasn't just in my ears. The entire house seemed to vibrate with it, the walls trembling as shadows danced across them. I turned, and there it was, the tall figure. It stood in the corner of my room, its long limbs folded in unnatural angles, its glowing eyes fixed on me. "You cannot fight the void," it said, its voice low and menacing. "You cannot undo what has been done." I gripped the notebook, my knuckles white. "Watch me." The figure tilted its head, its movements unervingly smooth. "You think you are brave, but you are afraid. I can taste it. I don't care what you think." I snapped. "I'm going back, and I'm taking them with me." "You cannot save them," it said, stepping closer. Its shadow loomed over me, cold and suffocating. "You will only lose yourself." "Maybe," I said, stepping forward, "but at least I'll fight." For a moment, the figure didn't move. Then it leaned closer, its face inches from mine. "You have been marked," it said. "The bridge will take you back, but it will not let you leave again." The air around me grew heavy, and the shadows deepened, but I didn't back down. "I'll leave," I said, my voice firm, "and I'll take them with me." The figure didn't reply. It dissolved into mist, leaving the humming behind. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling. The fear was still there, gnawing at the edges of my mind, but I wouldn't let it win. I was going back to the bridge, and this time I wouldn't stop until I brought them home. I stood at the edge of the bridge, the mist swirling like it was alive, beckoning me forward. The notebook was tucked under my arm, its symbols glowing faintly in the moonlight. This was it, no turning back. I stepped onto the bridge, and the world shifted. The air grew heavier with each step, the hum vibrating in my chest. The mist thickened, closing around me like a shroud. I gripped the notebook tighter, my heart racing, but I kept moving. Halfway across, the stone beneath my feet seemed to twist and ripple. The mist began to take shape, coiling into the tall figure that had haunted me since the first night. "You return," it said, its voice layered with malice. "Foolish." I didn't stop. "You think you are brave," it hissed, moving to block my path. "But the void will claim you." I opened the notebook, the symbols flaring to life as I turned the pages. The figure recoiled, hissing, its body flickering like a weak signal on a screen. "What is this?" it snarled. "The way to stop you," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. The notebook seemed to respond to my intent. The symbols glowed brighter, their shapes rearranging themselves into something new, something I could understand. Instructions. I began to read aloud. The words weren't in any language I knew, but they felt right, resonating in my chest as I spoke. The figure lashed out, its claw-like hands slicing through the air, but the light from the notebook created a barrier, holding it back. "You cannot save them," it roared, its voice shaking the bridge. "We'll see about that," I said. The mist around me began to swirl violently, pulling at my clothes and hair, but I kept reading. The ground beneath me cracked, and the bridge seemed to stretch infinitely in both directions. And then I saw them, Sam, Ben, and Alyssa, their twisted forms emerging from the mist. Their hollow eyes locked onto me, their voices a chorus of anguish. "Tess, don't," I stepped toward them, the notebook still glowing in my hands. "I'm here to bring you back," I said, my voice breaking. "You cannot undo what has been done," the figure hissed, looming over them. "They are mine." I flipped to the final page of the notebook. The symbols there were different, brighter, pulsating like a heartbeat. I didn't understand how I knew, but this was it, the final step. "I released them," I said, my voice echoing across the void. "I break the tether." The notebook erupted in light, blinding and white-hot. The mist shrieked, the figure twisting and convulsing as the light consumed it. "No!" it roared, its voice splintering into fragments. "You cannot!" But it was too late. The light expanded, swallowing the figure and the bridge and everything around us. And then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was back on solid ground. The bridge was behind me, silent and still, the mist gone. Sam, Ben, and Alyssa were lying nearby, unconscious but breathing. Their faces were no longer twisted, their bodies no longer broken. They were whole again. I dropped the notebook, its pages now blank and lifeless, and collapsed to my knees. They were safe. We didn't talk much about what happened after that. Sam, Ben, and Alyssa remembered fragments, bits of the other side, flashes of the void, but not much else. Maybe it was better that way. The bridge hasn't taken anyone since. Sometimes late at night, I think I hear the hum again, faint and distant. And when I do, I stay far away. The bridge gave me a second chance, but I know better than to test it again. Some places aren't meant to be crossed.